Hi folks, welcome to this video on sports in the 20th century. So this is another one of the socio-cultural topic ones. Remember, we're looking at factors that have changed over time that have affected participation in sport in Britain, in the UK. And, you know, these same terms are coming up time and time again: education, transport, availability of time, money and space, class, gender and law. This isn't a very flashy one. This video, you know, I'm just trying to get it to the point in this one because I know for some people, for many people, socio-cultural topics can drag a little bit. We're going to cut straight to the chase on all these factors and what's changed. Worth saying, it's a remember point, I'll put it at the top there. When we're talking about the 20th century, we're talking about the 1900s. So remember, this is the last century, 1900 to 1999. That was the 20th century. So let's first look at education. So what has changed since the post-1850s, since the Industrial Revolution? You know, the Industrial Revolution is still going, but what's happened since then? Well, education, we've had, if you remember to the last video, we had an Education Act that said everyone should be allowed education, regardless of their status in society, in 1870. Now in 1944, education is ramped up a notch. And if you read what was said in the Butler Education Act in 1944, continue towards the spiritual, mental and physical development of the community. So, education up until 1944 is very much focused on the spiritual and mental side of it, but now we're getting mention of the physical development of the local community. Education should get physical developments from everyone taking part. And much more recently, 1988, PE actually comes in as a proper subject, physical education. So it's brought in and it's still compulsory on the national curriculum. So what we're trying to say is in the 20th century, in the 1900s, sport has been given a much more prominent role in education. There's been specific mention to it in the Butler report. We've got to get people physically developed as well as just mentally and spiritually. And also PE is now becoming compulsory, particularly towards the back end of the 20th century, 1988. Transport as well, we're just building on what's happened before. So, after the Industrial Revolution, post 1850s, we've seen a big increase in public transport, the canals, we just had the road network, buses, but the railways was the biggie. But obviously, as we're moving through the 1900s, there's even better public transport and now private transport. People are, getting wealthy enough to buy their own cars, as we go through the 1900s. So more transport means more teams, performers and spectators can now travel to play, but also to watch. And something else that comes under the banner of transport, we've got radio coverage has increased. So even if you can't go live, you can still listen to it live. So you've still got access to sport, even if you can't physically get there yourself. And in terms of time, money and space, we're now getting more leisure time. More laws are coming into place to say that we can't overwork people. This is the number of hours that people must be made to work, and any more than that, you've got to pay them overtime, or you've got to give them breaks in between, things like that. As workers' rights come in, you get more social time. So there's more time to participate and watch. There's also more money. Wages start to increase. We have, for example, nowadays we have a minimum wage, don't we? But equally back then, we didn't have that as such. But, the amount you get paid is increasing. So there's more opportunity to either watch or take part again. However, we are a small country with a large and growing population. Space for sports facilities is still at a premium. And this ultimately slows down mass participation. So it's not a case of we've all got more time, we've all got more money, everyone take part in sport. We're still having opportunities, but we're still having blockages as well. And finally, class, gender and law. This is where you might want to pause it and think about a few things that have been said, because I haven't had space to write all this down because I've tried to get it all done quite succinctly. But what's happening is this: we are now getting more people attending, but it's mainly male dominated. So gender issues, sport is still mainly a male-dominated arena in the 20th century. Why are we getting more spectators? Because the standard is improving. We've been playing these sports for years and years and years now, so the standard is getting better. It's becoming more entertaining. But also, we've had World War I, 1914 to 1918. We've had World War II, 1939 to 1945. Sport is now being viewed by majority as a force for good, and ultimately is very popular as a result. Sport is your escapism, number one way of escapism, particularly during these harsh times. Now, following on from the World Wars, but probably a bit prior to that as well, we're getting purpose-built stadia Because sport is now developing as a business, because the standard is improving and more spectators are attending. We're building stadia to house them, because then we can charge them for watching. And that means more money is now coming into the sports. They're not, getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. These are lowly paid employees of a club, of a local club, but they're still getting paid. But it is increasing the level of professionalism. If you think about London, held the Olympics in 2012, the last time we held the Olympics was 1948. The 3 years after the Second World War ended, the games were put on hold whilst World War II was taking place. So we were the country that said, we have got purpose-built stadia. We can host the games that's going to bring the world together again, be a force for good after these dark times. The sport is growing in popularity. It's been seen as a useful power, as a useful tool. But it is still male-dominated, but we are getting some middle and upper-class women watching professional sport as a form of entertainment, but the majority didn't. Working class women had very little access to sport due to low pay. Don't forget, following these wars, big decrease in the male population because soldiers were killed overseas and at home and things like that during the Blitz and whatnot. So you've got more women coming in, which is good for women's rights and equal rights, but it means that they've got less leisure time as well because they're having to fill the void that has been left by the males. In terms of the law, what we've got there, sport is becoming more civilized as we're getting more modern. Boxing gloves, numbers on shirts to identify players. So there's now like an actual interest in individual performers, and we're watching and analysing individual performers. But it also allows us to enforce the rules of the game better, in terms of yellow cards and red cards, which has, been reflected at the times in terms of law. You are accountable, things like that. And most blood sports are now being banned, apart from hunting, which didn't get banned until relatively recently. So there is still an element of the upper classes keeping their activities, but ultimately trying to civilise other sports as well. We're still seeing sports like cricket, where the amateurs and professionals taking part side by side. Rugby union, for the bulk of the 20th century, remains amateur, whereas rugby league is professional. Football is becoming more and more working class. It's becoming more and more sport of the working classes. And sports like horse racing and boxing, the upper classes are providing the money, but the working classes are taking part. So you've got working class jockeys, working class fighters, but you've got upper class owners, upper class sponsors, upper classes and middle classes putting money in for gambling, things like that. And this is what I didn't have space to write, but the point I wanted to make in terms of the class structure, those taking part in sport, what has changed over the last 150, 200 years in terms of the 3 videos that we've done so far? The upper classes made these sports, football, rugby, cricket. They developed them and they wanted to keep them for themselves, so they gave them amateur codes. And then they started to let the odd working class person take part in terms of raising the standard so their team could win. But, there was a distinct difference between them and us, separate change rooms, as we mentioned in previous videos. So what's changed now is, as we're getting closer and closer to 1999 and the 21st century, the upper classes have kind of left the participation area. The participants are now mainly working class people in the bulk of sports, with some middle class. What the upper class is now, they are the owners. They are the chairmen and chairwomen. They are those kind of people with the big money who can now buy clubs and things like that. And your middle classes, and they've left the participation side of it largely. And they're now the people like agents or become people like agents, bit of money, but increasingly making more money. But it's the working class who've actually been encouraged now to take part, because without players, you don't have agents, or without players, you don't have clubs and stadia and, big business anymore. So there's a lot's changed over this 150, 200 years in terms of class. The working class were originally blocked, but now they're actively encouraged to take part for money as well as many other reasons. So that's this video on the 20th century. What we're going to look at now is sport, or the next video you should watch is sport in the 21st century. Hope you found this useful, folks.